welcome back to the Cover the Front podcast, here hosted at 215 Cav and 194th. I'm your host today, Chaplain Brad Staby for 2nd Squadron, 15 Cavalry Regiment. And today I've got one of my close friends in our sister squadron. Want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Andy Baird. I'm the chaplain for 515 Cav, where we are all for one and one for all. And we train all or nearly all of the 19 Deltas in the Army now. Prior to coming here, I was at our schoolhouse, and before that, I was at Fort Riley, Kansas, where I served in an Armor Brigade combat team with an infantry battalion.
Awesome. And next off, you're going off to Fort Bragg, and I think this will be one of the last things you wrap up here in Fort Benning.
Yeah, 2 days from now, and I sign out a post, and I leave Groundhog Day.
Awesome, man. So what we're going to be talking about today is, I think, just a digital recap of a lot of conversations that you and I have had together since we've been here ministering on the trail. And really the word that sticks out with us is the word foundation. You know, we've got Tedford Chapel that we renamed Foundations Chapel as a part of our services. Within the TRADOC world, one of our big projects was the foundations skills training. And then really today, just what, you and me are hoping to cover today is just the topic of building your foundation in the concept of resilience, being resilient, and just really adapting to just the warrior ethos and the soldier profession that we're doing. I think you and I have had a lot of conversations about what does foundation building look like, and then just kind of the guts in that. And so what I would like for us to do today is just unpack what does that look like, and then specifically for that person in our society who's looking at coming to the military, who's maybe got that 19 uniform contract and looking into what is an armor profession, what is the cavalry, what that specific foundation looks like.
Yeah, so I want to start and break this down. Foundation is the point of a building and the point of a house that everything else rests on. And so if the foundation is not strong, the building doesn't stand. And so that should be where we start, is what is the foundation? What is the most important thing that we build our future, our lives on? And we really look at the concept of your why. So if you're coming here to 194th, whether it's 215, 515, 181, you have gone through MEPS. You've done a goofy little duck walk.
Yep.
You've peed into a cup while somebody awkwardly watches you.
You've got your head shaved.
Yeah, and you have signed your name still on a line. Why did you do that? There has to be an underlying reason, and it's different for almost every person, but that why builds the foundation like nothing else can. There's a guy that survived the Holocaust in World War II. His name's Viktor Frankl. And in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about those with a why can endure almost any how. So what Frankl was getting at was he survived the camps, and he would argue that those that had a reason to live, and these were the work camps, not the death camps, were more likely to live and see the end of the war than those that did not, because they had a foundation that they could come back from. Another way that I'd like to look at it is your why, your foundation is kind of like a sprinter's starting blocks, where, if you start flat-footed, it's harder to get up to speed. It takes you a fraction of a second longer. Whereas if you've got those starting blocks, you are already in position to jump and to beat the gun, so to speak. We want you to have that why, because in the midst of this difficult time where we are turning you from a civilian to a soldier, and then from a soldier to a 19 series soldier, you have to have a why. And those without that why more often struggle to make it through this time.
Yeah, I would agree. I appreciate you saying that, man. It's funny, as you brought up building the house, I thought of this analogy as I was actually driving to work last week. Across from my neighborhood, they're putting in a new development, and they've been building the foundation for these houses, what seemed like weeks and weeks on end. Like they're just out there just digging, laying concrete. And then as I drove past this weekend, they did like the studs and the beams in the house. They did that in like 2 days.
Yeah.
But the building of the foundation, you have to get it right, because if you don't get it right the first time, having to go back around and do it again, something you don't want to have to do. And that's what I think the conversation here is, building that foundation, setting it well, setting it strong. And as you look to build that foundation, you know, our cadre is going to do everything we can to help you do it. And I'm sure this is the same way when you counsel soldiers. I can't give you a why.
No.
I can't give you a purpose.
That's not my thing. It's something that has to come from within you.
Yeah.
And that's why I said earlier, you know, there's so many different whys. For some people, it's for family. For some people, it's for benefits. For some people, it's for citizenship. For some people, it's for a steady paycheck. For some people, it's to just leave where they were. But it's different for everyone. But I want to add to that, as you're talking about, you know, the framing going up of a house. It's important once you are here to establish as strong of a relationship as you can with a battle buddy. So another thing that I talk to privates about routinely is that in the movie Forrest Gump, Forrest and Bubba go through basic training together, and then they go to Vietnam together. And in a scene there, it has just finished raining, where Forrest says that there was fat rain and there was sharp stinging rain and rain from the sides, and he goes like this, and he says, and sometimes it even felt like it was raining from below.
Yeah.
But then they sit down in the mud, and Bubba looks at Forrest and he says, Forrest, I'm going to lean up against you, and you lean back up against me. That way we don't have to sleep with our heads in the mud. Because no matter how strong your foundation is, no matter how strong your why is, there are times where we cannot do this by ourselves.
Yeah.
And in that moment, it is exceedingly important to have a battle buddy that you can rely on in your moment of difficulty to go to, and they can do the same and talk to you. Because nothing is going to beat that. Drill sergeant can't always be there.
Yeah.
Chaplain can't always be there. You have to have battle buddies that are in the bay, that are out doing the ruck marches, that are at the RM range, that are at every other event that you go through during your time in one station unit training. And it is exceedingly important.
And you're sparing some funny thoughts as you say that. What we see as we interface so much with trainees is often that seemingly, and you can disagree with me, is a lot of our trainees who seem to struggle the most through basic training and the IAT was our all-star athletes who were able to, you know, be like the single all-star athlete because they're trying to do it all by themselves.
Yeah.
Whereas often our soldiers who are really socially adept at, you know, building those bonds. It reminds me of this podcast or a proverb I once heard of. If you want to run fast, run alone. If you want to run far, run together.
Yeah, and you know, this contract that you sign when you join the Army, it's not a short distance race.
No.
Whether it's 3 years or you decide to stay in until you're kicked out at 30 for mandatory, that's a long time. That's a good chunk of time. And while you're here at OSUT, whether it's the first 10 weeks of basic training or the second half where you're in AIT, while privates are in it, they routinely feel like each day is a week. But when they reach the end of that first 10 weeks and they have family day, or they reach the end of OSUT, they turn around and it's gone by like that. It's like no time has passed at all. But it's so important, not just what they have learned, but again, those relationships. Because I can even go to my drill sergeants that are here, and 95% of them can at minimum name every drill sergeant that was in their platoon when they went through basic training or OSUT, if not the entire company or the entire troop. And that's a major piece. While you're here, it's difficult. No one's going to pretend that it's not. There's a reason that we name the FTXs what we do: hammer and anvil and forge. Because those three things are used to form metal into something that is a tool for war.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, we are here to fight and win our nation's wars.
When the phone rings.
And as 19 series, we are the combat arm of decision. That is what we do. We're going to be there where the metal meets the meat.
Yeah.
And we need to have those thoughts, and that needs to be a part of our foundation as well, is starting to think through the processes of what does being in conflict look like? What does it mean that I signed my name on this line? What did I actually sign up for when I said that I would support and defend the Constitution against all enemies? What does that mean? We have to have that conversation with ourselves.
And I love that you talk about hammer, anvil, forge, because that's the same three concepts that I talk about: resilience and building the foundation. Because as we look at our soldiers coming in, they've got the shaved head, getting off the white bus.
Yep.
The uncomfort zone, the discomfort zone is where we're living. Mm-hmm. But I say, hey, when we build a sword, how many people know what a sword is? All the hands go up across the room. Yep. We say the Army has identified you, and even if you're listening to this podcast, has identified you, and you've identified yourself to an extent of being that iron ore. Mm-hmm. But to become that resilient tool that we can take to war, that America can put its trust and confidence in, is that ore has to be heated. Yep. And it has to be heated. It has to be put on that forge and pounded over and over and over again. And that's the 18 to 22 week process here. But when we walk across that parade field, it's, man, I've now got some confidence that I can take this thing to do business with.
Yeah, there's a new term. I'm in school right now, and there's a term that's newer to me. It's not new at all, but it's this idea of liminal space. Liminal space is literally liminal space means in the threshold of a door, because you're not in the room that you left, and you're not yet in the room that you are going to. You're stuck in the tension of the already and the not yet, and this entire experience is putting yourself in the tension where things change. They get different. I tell trainees all the time that I asked how many of them know what the 1,000-pound club is, and inevitably half or so raise their hand. And,
breaks my heart. That's under half.
Yeah. It's those that between three lifts, the deadlift, the squat, and the bench, you lift 1,000 pounds. And I look at them and I say, very few, if any of you, could walk into a gym without any prep and join the 1,000-pound club. It takes sweat, it takes determination, and sometimes it takes blood in order to get there. But we have to be very intentional about what we do, and this place is all about intentionality. Pouring into you as a future soldier, as a recruit, as a trainee, and then as a soldier that's becoming a 19 series soldier, so that you can be ready to do what you're supposed to when the nation calls upon you.
100%. 100%. Hey, we talked a lot about building your foundation, but I think there's the other side of the coin that I think we miss sometimes, or trainees miss when they get here, because as we say in ministry, a lot of times you're running to something or you're running from something, and that whole foundation process is kind of, left out of the equation. How do you view, when the time is necessary, whether it's in BCT or red phase, do we have that awakening moment, when the rubber hits the road for stress of rebuilding your foundation? I know you've got a lot of time here. What is that in your experiences? How would you formulate this if you have to rebuild that formation?
In 2.5 years here, one thing that I have found to be true is that you have an opportunity here that you are not likely to have again. In that a lot of what we'll call, for the sake of this conversation, distractions are pulled away from you. You don't have your phone. You don't have your friends and family around you. And you're in an unusual place. And physically, there's a lot that's going on, sometimes mentally, but especially during BCT, it's more physical than it is mental. And you have an opportunity to figure out who you are, to find out what drives you. And maybe that's religion, and that helps determine a part of your why. Maybe that is your fellow trainees, that group piece, that we all wear this same green uniform. We become green when we join the Army. Maybe you realize through this time that family is one of those biggest things. And so, again, with intentionality, like we just talked about, you start to focus on that thing, whatever it is, to push you forward. But you're unlikely to have another opportunity like this where a lot of those distractions get stripped away and you're just there. So I talk about movies a lot. In Harry Potter, I forget if it's the last movie or the next to last movie. It's one of the last two. It's the last one. Harry is in this white King's Cross station with Dumbledore. And everything is like white or white shaded. Their clothes are white and everything. And they go over and they see this pathetic creature that's on the ground. And it is what remains of Tom Riddle, what remains of Voldemort, when everything has been stripped away. And he can't stand because of all of the things that he has done to lead him to where he is. We want to strip you away, but not to make it so you can't stand, but so that you can stand more firm, so that you're ready to meet the struggles and the difficulties that life brings. Because whether you've shown up here and you are broken and your life has been terrible, or you've never, like the star athlete, you've never had anything go wrong in life, life isn't like that. Things are going to happen that you don't have all the answers for. And so that resiliency, and maybe we should define that real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
So the Army has, at least for the last 10 or 15 years, resiliency has been a big topic. And the way we define that is that there are, for the sake of argument, there's only two types of balls. There are glass balls and there are rubber balls. If you drop a glass ball, it shatters, it breaks. But if you drop a rubber ball, it bounces back. And that is how the Army tends to define resiliency. And that is what we were looking for, is those people that can bounce back in the face of adversity, in the face of difficulty. I mean, you maybe they can see, if they're watching, this tab that you have right above the 194th crest. You went through at least 62 days of difficulty where you had to bounce back every day to earn that little piece of cloth that says Ranger. And you had to do that through rain, you had to do that through swamps, you had to do that in the mountains, and you had to do that while other people around you are quitting. And so it's always just one step away that all you have to do is say, I'm done, I'm tapped out, can't do any more. But you keep pushing. And that's the soldiers we're looking for. That's the civilians we're looking for. That's the recruits we're looking for. That's the trainees we're looking for, is those that can bounce back in the midst of difficulty.
Yeah. As we say, be the ball, not the egg.
Yeah.
The ball is bouncing back. Is in that the individual foundation leads into the group foundation, as
Yes.
we talk. Whether that goes to combat, that can be able to sustain these combat operations.
Yeah.
It starts here at Fort Beginning. Oftentimes we call Fort Benning Fort Beginning because of how much of your foundation gets relayed here. And I mean not like a relay on the radio, but like hey, I've got to put these bricks back in place here because this isn't as strong as I once thought it was.
And it's not completely unique, but the concept of one station unit training provides for that. Where a lot of MOSs in the Army, a lot of military occupational specialties, you do your basic at one place, let's say Fort Jackson, and then you go somewhere completely different for your AIT. Let's say Fort Greg Adams, right? Whereas here, everyone that comes to Fort Benning does their time at Fort Benning. They're at the same battalion or squadron for both their basic combat training and for their advanced individual training. And they're looking at that time all as one because we really need that to develop those combat armed soldiers to be what the Army needs them to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about individual foundation, rebuilding that foundation. Mm-hmm. And we know a lot of times when our soldiers, our recruits come to the Army, they're bringing their family with them. Mm-hmm. Yes, most of them are fresh out of high school or wherever, but we have a huge population that are bringing your family with you. Mm-hmm. What insights would you have for building that family foundation now, that family resilience before coming to Fort Benning? So first, or any other IET entry source.
Yeah, I would say that one of the important pieces is to set expectations, realistic expectations.
That was my first thought.
Mom, dad, husband, wife, significant other, kids, whatever it is, relations. I'm not going to be able to answer your texts.
Yeah.
If you're here, I will be able to call on Sundays. And it's not a lot of time. And I'm in a room with a bunch of other people that are all trying to talk to their people that they care about. And so that's the first piece, is that's difficult. And no one's trying to say that it's not. But I think that so often setting the reason also to your family. Not just that you define your why, but they understand your why. Because it is building a foundation to get you out of where you are. Whether it's a steady job that provides benefits for you and your household, whether it's citizenship for you or your significant other, whether it's, safety and getting out of the situation that you were in before. When we all realize that, it helps. I don't want to say that any of this is like an inoculation that's going to fix everything, but having that same understanding, being on that same page makes all the difference.
And I think, as we say, as chaplains, we can't give you your purpose. We can't give you your why. That's some homework that you have to figure out for yourself. I would charge you that if you're coming to the Army with dependents, is to have, like you said, have those conversations that our why is, one, on the same page, but two, our why is strong enough to withstand our recycle or withstand a PCS to a place that you've never heard of, to have that why to withstand not being away from grandma and grandpa when you start having kids, because that's some bigger stuff that we start to see. Because I think you came into the Army with kids. And I came into the chaplain corps as a dad. And how often do we see our chaplain peers who brought their families into it? 100%. And you got to be on that same page.
We get trainees that are your age or my age, but not as often. Like chaplains come in, and the average age for a chaplain coming into the Army is like 33 years old. So they've established a bit of a life. They often have kids or lots of kids. And so looking what that looks like, because you're bouncing around every 2 to 3 years to different parts of the country, and setting expectations again for your family, making sure that we're all on the same page. And then I would be remiss if I didn't talk about one piece here. So the Army is built on doctrine and these ideas. And about 6 years ago, the Army came out with this publication. It was a field manual, 722, that talked about holistic health and fitness. And in it, the Army said that it's not just your physical fitness that is important. It is also your sleep fitness, your nutritional fitness, your mental fitness, and the fifth one is your spiritual fitness. And those are important pieces to you as an individual and to you and your family. And that spiritual piece, as the Army defines it, is what makes you you. So if we're talking about foundation, boy, that is it. What makes you you? Whether you derive that from philosophical ideas or humanist ideas or religious ideas. The Army doesn't dictate and say it must be this thing. But what makes you you? And again, as you're figuring out more of these things while you're here, whether you're 17 and you're a STO 1 or you're up near 40, because there's guys that come in or folks that come in that are near 40. What makes you you? Where can you dig deep? What can you use as your why in the moment where you're not sure you can keep going?
Yeah. I'm going to steal a page from the training symposium we had a couple of weeks ago, where senior chaplain shared this stat. He said, what differentiated those soldiers, and I would extend this to families, who responded best and fared well the best to traumatic events, because we are in a trauma-based profession, is having a higher spiritual belief system. Now, that's not dictating what that looks like, but those who had one, all the data shows, the statistics shows, the research speaks for itself. Those families and those individuals that had the higher belief system fared the best, when the resilience cost came. And
as our founding documents talk about, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That happiness, there's new terms that are starting to define that, and they call it human flourishing. And they have, through lots of research, discovered that spirituality and the ability to have a strong spiritual base is one of the key indicators of those that are identified as flourishing and those that are not. It's not not always your love life. It's not your money. It's not your station in life. One of the biggest things is your spiritual base. And where you derive meaning.
We'd be remiss as chaplains if we didn't get to bring that up. It's like
at least once.
And I would just circle back to the rebuilding your foundation. If everything that you listen, if our listeners are like, hey, that is a missing gap in my life, that opportunity is here to build that. we've got a myriad of programs. You'll see it when you show up.
Yep.
But I would leave that door open for them there.
Yeah.
All right, man, let's, recap as we talk about building our foundation, finding that purpose, finding that why, rebuilding your foundation if necessary, and then having those conversations with your family. Is there one final nugget, one bullet point that you could put into the rucksack here to take away that you'd share just as a chaplain of what you've seen within the 19 series world?
So in the 2.5 years that I've been here in my squadron, there's been, I don't know, somewhere around 7,500 trainees come through. And in that time, every one of them changes in some way. Whether they have an injury that makes it so they can't train anymore, or they complete training. Every one of them leaves a different person than they showed up. Now, I'm an eternal optimist, so I would like to think that they leave a better person than when they showed up. But this place and joining the military necessarily changes part of the DNA of who you are. No one, and sometimes they leave before they get the name patches, but no one that puts on the U.S. Army patch and wears a uniform for any number of days leaves, at least this installation, the same as when they showed up. This is a life-changing experience, and you have the ability to define what that change looks like.
Man, I appreciate just you sharing that, and I know that 7,500 trainees is a lot.
Yeah.
I can't think of just how many shaved heads that is, coming through here. And
An awful lot of them.
yeah, and there's a lot that we could continue to speak about that. But, man, I just want to thank you for your time today. I know this is just an enduring conversation that we've had that we're going to extend and continue to have and then just pass on in the legacy of the Armor and Cav world here. So I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for coming out today and just the conversation we get to have together.
I really appreciate it, Brad.
Lines cover the front.